So now there's something else to address. And we're talking about Zoro, our favorite Marimo. We cannot get enough of Zoro. I don't know, man. I'm really tempted to make him the MVP of Onigashima, but we're gonna hold off. We're gonna wait till the end of the war to decide who the MVP is. But we have other questions for Oda. Now, Oda, we're asking you, is Zoro as strong or stronger than Luffy? Yes, I know to some people it sounds a bit crazy. To some people, they're like, well, we all knew that. What are you talking about? So we're going to address that today. Could Zoro be as strong as Luffy or even stronger? With that being said, please take this opportunity to subscribe to this channel. Maybe you've watched a few videos, you haven't realized that you're not subscribed. If you have not, please hit that sub button, drop a like as well. And without further ado, is Zoro actually stronger than Luffy? Okay, so this has been a conversation from the beginning of time. Well, actually not beginning of time, towards the end of the time skip, especially after Thriller Bark and everything that transpired there, where Zoro survived after nothing happened. Obviously, he took his damage, Luffy's damage, and through all that, he survived. Granted, for the rest of pre-time skip while the Straw Hats were together, Zoro was a bit hurt, but the point remains, he lived. And that wasn't the beginning of Luffy and Zoro and their whole spat about who's stronger, because we remember Whiskey Peak when they had their whole spat about Luffy and the miscommunication there, and they had a quick back and forth, and no one was really the victor. But I think it started to pick up there, okay, who's really stronger? Coming out of the time skip, looking at both characters and their trajectory, the conversation started to happen again, because people were looking at who trained Luffy and who trained Zoro. And of course, at that point in their careers, Mihawk was stronger than Rayleigh, but who is the better mentor? And one could argue Mihawk is better for Zoro than Rayleigh is for Luffy based off of just how well they mesh. Mihawk is essentially what Zoro is trying to get to. For Rayleigh, he can teach Luffy the essentials or basics of haki, but he can never teach him how to master his devil fruit. So there's a bit of a limitation there, so you give Mihawk the edge. I think the conversation slowed down a bit when we got to Fishman Island and the Conqueror's haki thing came into play. But remember the famous quote where Zoro says, and there's so many translations with this, where he said something to the effect of, if you couldn't at least do that, then you wouldn't be able to be my captain, when Luffy knocked out all the fishmen in Fishman Island. That led to some speculation that Zoro could have Conqueror's haki. I'd been saying for the longest, Zoro, just based off of what he embodies as a character, should have Conqueror's haki, and lo and behold, it was revealed that Zoro has Conqueror's haki, or does he? Now, I don't want to question that, because Kaido even said, hey, you have the color of the Supreme King as well. We may touch on this at some point, with the variants of the color of the Supreme King. Like every form of haki seems to have some type of variant or another way to use it. So for Conqueror's haki, with the coding and the overwhelming, I'm not mad at variants. Now, what I've seen is that people have been taking me saying, oh, Zoro has a variant or a different type of Conqueror's haki as a slight, which is not to demean Zoro or what he's accomplished, but just to try and understand this power, this type of haki even more. So please, if you're a Zoro stan or even a sword swallower, do not take this as an offense. We're just trying to understand even more here. However, the Zoro and Luffy debate, I think the gap for most people had widened by the time we got to Wano, because of the progression of fights that Luffy had gotten in comparison to Zoro, where Luffy is fighting tougher and tougher opponents and growing more and more, learning new abilities, and Zoro for the most part was stagnant. He wasn't even a part of Whole Cake Island, while Luffy's fighting Katakuri, Cracker, and growing in so many ways. And we can't even forget about Dressrosa, where Zoro made short work of Pika, while Luffy struggled a bit with Dofi and was aided by Law. However, there's something to be said about Zoro absolutely dominating Pika, who was Doflamingo's executive, and in a way matching a Navy Admiral. So, I mean, off of that, you can't help but start to wonder, hey, if Zoro and Luffy fought, who would win? And I think that would take some time to kind of come to a conclusion there. I mean, by Dressrosa, but I mean, after Whole Cake Island, fighting Cracker, fighting Katakuri, learning Future Sight, and now getting to Wano, the gap had widened, right? If we just go through Wano and we jump to Onigashima, so far, it's not a crazy conversation. I think it's crazy to say Zoro is stronger than Luffy, but it's not a crazy conversation to say that Zoro is pretty close to Luffy. So when we look at how things have played out, right? I think situationally, Oda is strategically putting Zoro and Luffy in positions in which they can excel, obviously, but also they seem to be more interchangeable than anything. And the same can be said for Killer and Kid. Some may say Killer has been even more impressive than Kid in the fight against Kaido and Big Mom. The situation with Apoo, where Zoro and Luffy, they both got hit with attacks, different attacks, but they both got hit, and Zoro had to carry Luffy for a while, where I think in either situation, again, Luffy and Zoro seem to be interchangeable. Then when we jump to the fight against Kaido, there are various moments where it shows that Zoro is on the level of the strongest supernova period. For Luffy and Zoro, again, they were tag team and doing amazing things where if you say Zoro's stronger than Kid right now, I'm not going to contest it too much. Granted, Kid's abilities, they're still yet to be fleshed out, but you're not going to get much pushback from me if you say, hey, Zoro's stronger than Kid, because based off of what Zoro's been doing on the rooftop, it has been completely asinine. So yes, Luffy has been going in with Red Rock and things of that nature, but I think the great equalizer for Zoro in comparison to what Luffy learned in regards to Future Sight and even Ryo is that you could argue that Zoro knew Ryo coming into Onigashima based off of what the Breath of All Things was supposed to be in Alabasta. Granted, we haven't seen much of that since then. There's some small moments that people hint towards these things, but you weren't sure. So now Zoro has Enma, and Zoro had an attack in Onigashima where Big Mom told Kaido to dodge because who knows what would have happened, right? So that's the first inclination that Zoro's on a completely different level than he was before, or what he was perceived to be. And even with that, I'm not even sure if it's fair because a lot of people understood that Zoro was being withheld. Zoro was not showing his full capabilities, and we finally saw Ashura in Onigashima, and that left a permanent scar on Kaido, the world's strongest creature, somebody that could not be damaged. And the only other person to land a permanent scar was Enma and of course Oden. So time and time again, we're seeing feats from Zoro that I think exceed anything we've seen from the other supernova except for Luffy. One thing I gotta say though, right? Because personally, spoiler alert, I put Luffy above Zoro, right? But I think there's something to be said about swordsmen in One Piece. That the top two strongest ever, they both use blades. In Roger and Whitebeard. And something key in this fight against Kaido is that Zoro, he has the capability to do a lot more damage than Luffy because he's using a blade as opposed to Luffy with his blunt attacks. That's why the Ryo that Luffy's learning, the internal damage, is so much more effective and so essential for him because of the blunt attacks. It limits how much damage he can do to Kaido, at least before learning this attack. So it was just blunt attacks, where for Zoro, I mean, he can cut right through him. We saw what Ashura did. So the internal destruction that Ryo presents for Luffy, or that type, or I should say advanced armament, is not necessary for Zoro because he has a blade. But now we have to factor in what Oda just introduced is the Conqueror's Haki that Zoro is embedding within his attacks. So now when you factor all this in, the upgrade of Enma, Zoro now confirmed to have Conqueror's Haki, and we know his durability and endurance is out of this world. We saw him jump in front of an attack, a combined attack from two Yonko, and block it momentarily, long enough to save the others. Granted, Law helped as well, but Zoro was able to do that. So again, when you factor in all these things, I think you're crazy if you put Zoro over Luffy, because Luffy is just amazing. He's now clashing with Kaido and they're not touching, right? But I think the gap between Luffy and Zoro, it's smaller than I thought. I would say that. I'm continuously impressed by everything Zoro is able to do on the rooftop. And let's just throw it out there, right? Based on where we are now, where Luffy has his advanced conquerors, advanced armament, future sight, where Zoro has Enma, he has conquerors as well, insane endurance, and he's using blades. If Luffy and Zoro were to fight, I don't think it's a toss-up. I think Luffy wins, but he's beaten pretty badly. Because the thing that Zoro has is that the potency of his attacks could definitely one-shot you. Now, granted, I don't think Luffy would get one-shot, but he has that potential. Personally, I don't think Luffy has any attacks that could one-shot Zoro. I just don't see it, right? So that's the scary part in a Luffy versus Zoro matchup. And I guess at this point, my conclusion is, if you go back to Onigashima and everything that Zoro has accomplished, or rather, right, this could be a bit controversial, but based on everything Luffy has done to Kaido, could Zoro do the same things? I don't think to the same effect because, again, their fighting styles are completely different, but the attack potency, I think, is very similar. And you could argue Zoro's is a bit higher because he's using blades. Now, Luffy having the coded Conqueror's Haki attacks with the Ryo and all that different stuff, you could scale it higher for sure. But man, this dude Zoro, and I think based on what Zoro has shown here, it gives more credence to Mihawk and some more to even Silver's Rayleigh, because we weren't sure of the gap between Roger and Ray. And if Oda's going to try to parallel these relationships, I don't think Rayleigh was that far behind Roger at this point, man. But we're still in wait and see mode to see how these things finish up. I don't think Zoro's done. Luffy's obviously not done. But yeah, Marimo, man. Just to clarify, I don't think Zoro is stronger than Luffy, but I do think it's not that huge of a gap. I really don't. But guys, give me your thoughts. Do you think Zoro's stronger than Luffy? Can you make the case for Zoro being stronger than Luffy? Because if you say you can, then I don't agree. Or do you think he's just as strong or close to Luffy? But guys, give me your thoughts. Make sure to like the video if you did. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Follow me on Twitter at BragoDAce. Follow me on Instagram at BragoD.Ace. Thank you to my patrons. I appreciate you guys so much. Guys, like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
B.D.A. I start doubting me, I felt lost. I rewrite it.